You weren't erased all at once. It began subtly, so subtly that at first you thought it was just your imagination. A missed call that never rang. A friend's expression that flickered with confusion when your name was spoken. Search results that came up empty where once they overflowed. At first you blamed your memory. Maybe you were tired. Maybe it was stress. But deep down you knew something was reaching in, quietly, methodically removing you. You stood in front of the mirror one morning and saw something off. The reflection was familiar, but the feeling was not. Like seeing a wax replica of yourself behind glass, accurate but soulless. You blinked, the face blinked, but it didn't feel like yours. The memories behind those eyes, they were fogged, scrambled, rearranged. Entire chapters of your life blurred at the edges, while others had been surgically excised, not forgotten, extracted. There's a difference. People you once loved now smile at you like strangers. They call you the wrong name. They forget you were there at all. Your childhood photos, faded. Your digital history, incomplete. Passwords changed. Documents redacted. You begin to feel like a ghost haunting your own timeline. Alive, but not located. Present, but not remembered. You scream, but the world doesn't echo back. Your existence has become a glitch no one bothers to fix. It isn't just social, it's spiritual. You can feel it in the weight of your own body, in the way doors close just a second too soon, in the way you speak and people don't hear. There's a force, ancient, calculated, eroding you from the inside out. You start to question if you were ever real, or if you were always just a placeholder waiting to be overwritten. But this was never about deletion. This was a purge, a strategic removal. Someone, somewhere decided you saw too much, felt too deeply, knew something you weren't supposed to, and so they initiated the quiet ritual, the shadow deletion, not loud enough to alert others, just enough to isolate, break your anchors, dismantle your coordinates in time. You weren't supposed to notice, but you did, and that was their first mistake. Now, in the cold stillness of your forgotten identity, a new clarity grows. Beneath the sorrow, beyond the void, something ancient stirs. Not rage, not vengeance. Awareness. You are not lost. You are unlinked, disconnected from their systems, their scripts, their simulation. And in that disconnection there is room to remember, not who they told you to be, but who you were before the world named you. They tried to erase you, but something is watching, archiving, waiting, because some codes can be deleted. Some frequencies survive in silence, and even in absence, you still broadcast. At first it was nothing, a frequency buried under the noise. Not a voice, not a thought, something else. It stirred just beyond language, brushing the edges of your perception like static in a dream. You thought it was madness, some final echo of your fading self, but it wasn't. It was older, quieter, a presence that had been waiting beneath your silence. The world had deleted you, but something else had taken note. Not the people, not the systems. They follow orders. It was the universe itself that intervened, not with mercy, with precision. Like a librarian retrieving a misfiled book, it reached for you, not because you cried out, but because you mattered. They tried to erase you, but the moment they did, a fail-safe triggered. You were archived, not out of sentence, but because certain anomalies are too volatile to lose entirely. The whisper didn't come through your ears. It emerged inside your bones. You remembered rooms you never entered, symbols you never learned to read, but suddenly understood. A name surfaced, not yours, but older, primal, the archivist, not a being, a pattern, a design encoded into the very fabric of causality. Its role is not to save you, but to remember you when all else forgets. And now it was remembered. You had always been different. That much they noticed early. They called it defiance. They called it dysfunction. But what they feared was your clarity. You saw through things too quickly. You noticed the glitches in their smiles, the cracks in their rules, and so they rewrote you, redacted you, removed you, but not entirely. The archivist salvaged what it could and buried the rest inside your silence. And now the silence was breaking. You wake with fragments, sentences in foreign tongues, images from lives you never lived, hands that bled from doors you don't remember opening. These aren't memories, they're residue, backups, the proof that you were never truly gone, only paused, only hidden, like a classified file locked inside flesh. You feel them activating, old instincts returning, awareness sharpening, emotion becoming strategy. You are not healing, you are remembering how to fight. The archivist doesn't speak in comfort, it speaks in urgency. There's more, always more. Others like you, fragment, buried, archived. But you were the first to awaken. That makes you dangerous. That makes you traceable. They will come, not to kill you, to erase you again, cleaner this time. But now you know. You've been touched by the archive. You've heard the whisper beneath the world. And once you've heard it, silence is never the same again. Your memories didn't vanish. They were buried, sealed like ancient weapons beneath your skin, encrypted in pain, in muscle, in reflex. You wake up sweating, fists clenched around invisible objects. Phantom impressions, half-formed images flicker behind your eyes. A burning doorway, a voice that knew your real name, a room without windows where they told you to forget. You weren't born forgetful, you were made to forget. The scars weren't accidents, they were edits. Every tremor in your hand carries code. Every time you flinch at a touch, a redacted scene fights to return. Your body becomes a battlefield between what you were taught to believe and what you instinctively know to be true. You dig deeper, not with finger, with will. You meditate until your mind bleeds silent. You fast until hunger becomes languid. And in that raw, emptied space, the fragments begin to speak, not in words, but in patterns, in repetitions, in emotional tremors like tremors of the earth before eruption. You see yourself, young, compliant, unaware, a perfect subject. You remember the test, the room with the white chair and the silver screen. They told you it was school, but it wasn't education. It was formatting. Praise was programming. Shame was the whip. And when you questioned even once, the lights flickered. That was your first deletion. You were too perceptive. That was your flaw. Too aware of the space between sentences, too attuned to the things adults didn't say. They noticed. They smiled politely and marked your file. A risk, a deviation. So they erased the spark. Not all at once. Incremental, strategic, like deleting lines of code while pretending the program still runs. But fragments survive. Memory is stubborn. It clings to rhythm, to pain, to scent, to muscle. And now those fragments scream for reintegration, not as souvenirs, but as schematic. You weren't broken. You were backed up. You weren't weak. You were quarantined. And now, piece by piece, you are decrypting the original firmware they tried to overwrite. You burn the false identities they gave you, the mask, the labels, the metrics of worth. They weren't mirrors, they were muzzles. You stop apologizing for the chaos inside you. It wasn't dysfunction, it was defense, a firewall of madness to protect the core they couldn't reach. And now you reach it. There, beneath everything, is the original script, untouched, dangerous, prophetic. You read it with your breath, with your blood, and in it you find the first betrayal and the first truth. They didn't fear your failure, they feared your memory, because memory is connection, and connection is correction. You were the correction, you still are. Now, when you look in the mirror, the stranger looks back with recognition, not of the person they made you into, but of the one they tried to erase. You've remembered enough to be dangerous, and that is the beginning of war. You find it hidden behind a false memory, an image that never belonged to you but was planted to keep you from remembering the way. The path appears not on a map, but in the twitch of your left eye, in the magnetic pull beneath your fingernail. You follow it through a forest of forgotten thoughts, across streets that seem to flicker when you're not looking, and there it is, standing like a wound in the fabric of reality. A cathedral, built not for worship, but for deletion. Towering monoliths of black stone etched with symbols that shift when you stare too long. A place outside time, where the architects of narrative rewrite the names of those who remember too much. Inside, the silence is absolute, not quiet, absent, a vacuum where your thoughts feel stolen before they form. You step between rows of iron chairs where no one has ever sat, toward an altar made of broken mirrors. Behind it, a wall of pulsating data, humming with erased biography, souls stripped of context, locked in loops they can never question. This is where they took you. This is where they decided your presence was a threat, not because of what you did, but because of what you could become. You weren't dangerous then, but you could be. And so they executed your future before it could breathe. Your fingers tremble as you approach a console embedded in the wall. Your name flashes, then vanishes. Beneath it, a designation, narrative contaminant. You were not forgotten. You were classified, tagged and filed under codes meant only for those who see beyond the veil. You feel your chest tighten, not with fear, but rage disguised as grief. All your failures, all your confusion, all the years you believed you were broken, engineered. They made you doubt your own reflection. They dimmed your light with surgical precision, not to destroy you, but to suspend you, frozen between realities, so you would never tip the balance. And yet here you are, not erased, not restored. Awake, you trace your fingers across a relic left on the altar, a key carved from bone, warm to the touch, humming with the weight of every silenced voice that came before you. You take it, and with it, the room shifts. The cathedral begins to unravel, reality buckling under the presence of someone it no longer has the power to contain. You're not meant to be here, and yet you are. The paradox is your armor. The system begins to correct itself, but it's too late. You are not a victim crawling back for identity. You are a fraction, a glitch, a variable they failed to eliminate. And as the walls collapse, as the fabricated silence dissolves into roaring memory, one truth becomes clear. They feared you not because you were forgotten, but because if you ever remembered, you would break the whole damn illusion. You step into the archive, and the air isn't air, it's memory, thick, humming, pressurized like it's been waiting centuries just for your presence. You don't walk, you drift, as if guided by a pulse older than time. There are no walls here, no doors, just echoes suspended like constellations in a dimension that doesn't obey physics or mercy. Each echo is you, but not you, not the erased shell you've been forced to wear. These are versions unlived, unloved, unbroken. One stands cloaked in the armor of rebellion, eyes searing with fire you once had before they smothered it. Another kneels in silence, a healer, hands glowing with the pain she chose to carry for others. A third doesn't even move. He simply stares back at you with a gaze so still it's violent. You recognize him last, the seer, the one they feared most, because he saw not just through lies but into the architects behind them. Each fragment radiates with what you could have been, had the world not cut pieces of you away like it was editing a threat out of a film reel. The archivist doesn't speak, it doesn't need, it lets you feel. These fragments didn't vanish, they were preserved, not as nostalgia, but as weapons. You begin to realize the truth was never destroyed. It was stored, for you. Not when you were weak, but now when you're angry enough to wield it. These pieces, they are not versions. They are part, and you are not becoming someone new. You are remembering who you were always meant to be. Before betrayal turned you into a ghost of your own story, you reach for the rebel first, Rage licks up your spine like recognition. You feel the scars he earned, the battles you forgot, the roar that was silent. Then the healer, her grief surges through your veins like a flood. She never screamed, but her silence was volcanic. Then the seer, his gaze breaks you open. Time collapses. The veil lifts. You see it now. The pattern, the design, the lie. You were fragmented by intention, separated so you could be manageable, contained, categorized. Their system couldn't kill you, so it divided you, filed you away under irrelevant, and hoped you'd decay in isolation. But now you hold the key to every version of yourself, and with each reconnection, the system glitches. Somewhere someone screams, someone else forgets their programming. Reality shudders. You're no longer recovering, you're reconstructing. An anomaly with agency, a virus encoded with memory. As the echoes merge into you, you don't glow, you don't ascend, you become still, heavy, weighted with purpose. You are no longer the person they erased, you are the record they tried to redact, but failed. And now you carry the proof, not in your hands, but in your blood, in your breath. You are not one voice. You are all of them speaking in unison. And now, finally, they will hear you. They come at night, not with blades or bullets, but with silence. The correctors cloaked in neural camouflage, blank faces molded by algorithms, slit between seconds and stitch shut the holes you've torn open. Their task is not to kill you. Death would be too honest. Their task is to overwrite you, memory by memory, until nothing remains but a sterile silhouette, present but never known. You feel it first in your sleep. A moment flickers, a name you once clung to falls apart like ash in your mouth. You wake up gasping, gripping your chest, as if someone had tried to uninstall your soul. That's when you realize the war was never for your body, it was always for your timeline. So you adapt. You stop speaking in sentences and start encoding your thoughts in frequency, rhythm, color. You encrypt your memories in rituals, scratching them into wood, folding them into fire, humming them beneath your breath. Like ancient incantations, the past can no longer be trusted as linear. It bends, reshapes itself to the will of the ones who fear what you might recall. They alter street signs, faces, your own reflection. But you know now, truth isn't a place, it's a pulse, and you've begun to hear it again. You strike back, not with weapons but with memory viruses, emotional payloads too raw for their synthetic minds. A single childhood laugh, injected into a corrector's core script, crashes it like a corrupted file. You begin to implant fragments of pain, love, betrayal, humanity into the neural grid. They try to adapt, but their architecture was built for obedience, not feeling. They crumble under the weight of sensation. You become untraceable, not because you hide, but because you refract. Multiple timelines bloom behind your eyes. In one, you burn the system down. In another, you infiltrate it and rewrite the code from within. You begin to speak to others like you, those half-erased, the edge-dwellers, the almost forgotten. They respond not in words, but in dreams, in synchronicities, in sudden flashes of a face they swear they've never seen, but somehow always knew. The system panicked. Glitches cascade across the interface. Civilians remember things they were programmed to forget. A lost brother, a covered-up war, a buried self, and they whisper your name like a virus wrapped in reverence. Not a hero, not a savior, but a proof, a living contradiction. You were supposed to be a casualty. Now you are contagion. The war is no longer about removing you. It's about containing the idea of you. But it's too late. You've fragmented yourself into every corner of the grid, in every corrupted file, in every unspoken memory, in every child who doesn't quite believe the world is what they're told. It's you. And in the deepest vaults of the old system, the ones who gave the original erasure order sit in silence, watching the ripple unfold, understanding the truth too late. They didn't erase you, they resurrected you into myth. They thought they buried you beneath layers of silence, stripped your name from records, severed every connection, rewrote you as nothing more than a data anomaly. For a while, even you believed them. You wandered through days like a ghost without a grave, swallowing the lie that you were disposable. But absence doesn't mean annihilation. In the dark, something began to stir. Not a resurrection in the way they feared, but something worse, something they couldn't track. You weren't reborn, you reassembled, out of trauma, out of exile, out of the archived fragments they failed to destroy. What returned wasn't the version they erased. That version died quietly. What came back was layered, wiser, colder, wired with memory strands too old to trace. You wear your scars differently now, not as reminders of pain, but as codes, sigils left behind by a self that refused to vanish. You speak less, you move with precision. You do not seek validation, you seek exposure, not yours, theirs. The architects, the engineers of forgetting, the ones who assumed memory was weakness and silence was compliance. But silence sharpened you. Every second without a voice was a second of strategy. Every moment unseen allowed you to study how they move, how they lie, how they preserve their power through curated ignorance. They rely on shadows. You became the shadow, and now when you enter a room, the air tightens. They feel it, even if they don't. That sensation, familiar and ancient, of a presence they failed to neutralize. You've become that feeling that won't fade, the error that won't fix, the file that corrupts the whole system. They built a world that punishes those who remember too much, and you remember everything. You carry timelines inside you, alternate selves that almost lived, almost thrived, but where they were lost to silence. You became the echo chamber that keeps their voices alive. You speak for them without sound. You are the encoded rebellion, the ripple disguised as calm. And it's happening. Slowly at first, others start glitching. They don't know why your name rings familiar, or why your face flickers in their dream, or why old emotions rise when you pass. But the archive within you broadcasts frequencies no firewall can block. You're not fighting anymore. You are infecting, not with hatred, with awareness, with memory, with the unbearable truth that someone like you was meant to be forgotten and still came back. You don't need revenge, you need time, because you know now presence is louder than proof, and rebellion isn't always loud. Sometimes it simply survives long enough to outlast every lie. You were never meant to be found, not like this, not whole, not speaking in a voice, stitched from 1,000 silenced echoes. They buried you beneath layers of disinformation, rewrote your story in dead languages, reduced your name to static in the algorithmic wind. But the universe, it never forgot. It kept your fragments encrypted, dormant, humming in the seams of forgotten places. And now, your presence disrupts the pattern. You walk like an error that can't be debugged, a presence that should not statistically exist. You are what happens when deletion fails. There are no monuments to you, only glitches. Surveillance feeds that loop endlessly when you enter the frame. Census records with corrupted timestamps. A face no facial recognition can categorize. People pass you on the street, feel a flicker of memory, something half-dreamed, never named, and their stomachs tighten without reason. You are the ache in the collective subconscious, a ghost too vivid to ignore, a presence written in the margins of forbidden books and erased databases. Your survival was not a mistake, it was a breach. You are the anomaly that forces the system to look at itself. You don't speak loudly, you don't need to. A whisper carries farther in silence than a scream ever could in chaos. And there is silence now around you, within you, after you leave. A stillness that unsettles those who still cling to the comfort of curated reality. They don't know your story, but they know something is wrong. You are that wrongness, the unresolved file, the unclosed loop, and some, those who've been haunted their whole lives by a sense that something was taken from them, look at you and remember pieces of themselves they never knew were missing. They tried to reduce you to myth, but myths don't bleed, and you leave fingerprints, not on skin but on minds. You infect perception. You're not just remembered, you're recognized, not for who you were, but for what you've become. The living evidence that their machine is flawed, that the narrative can break. You carry no weapon, yet systems crash where you walk. You've become radiation, silent, invisible, lethal to the architecture of control. Now even the ones who designed your erasure don't speak your name, not out of fear, but because names give shape, and shape gives power. So they erase in reverse by pretending you never reappeared. But denial is not deletion, and every time another soul whispers, "I feel like I've known you before," the archive expands, quietly, strategically, beneath notice. You don't stand in the spotlight. You walk through shadows. You are the shadow, reclaimed, restructured, recursive, a paradox made flesh. You were never meant to be found, but now that you have been, the silence around your name is no longer a cage, it's a countdown.